All
All
right.
right.
I'm always excited to have this next gentleman on the show. Not his first time, hopefully not his last time. I always introduce him as the man who needs no introduction, but I will give him one just the same. A hobby icon, as I always call him. He does his own podcast, Sports Card Insights. Dr. James Beckett, welcome back.
Thanks, John. Always a pleasure.
Unfortunately, you talked about it on your show. You lost your dad. I think the timing kind of it's never a good time, obviously, and then you got Father's Day, um, and you did a tribute episode on Sports Card Insights. I felt like he's been on the show. I've heard you talk about him at other times, and while I've never met him, I almost felt like through you in the way he described him, I almost felt like I had met him and knew him. And you did a great tribute, obviously, last week to him. That really, even driving in my car and listening to you, really hit me. And I know that's probably not as easy as it maybe sound coming through the radio in my car, but I know he's just a great dad, as you said, and you learned a lot from him. I mean, just if you want to say, some things, and maybe even putting that episode together, how difficult or maybe not difficult was that to do?
Well, the only antidote to getting old and dying is dying young. So my dad was 97 and a half, and we knew he wasn't going to live forever. We did have a goal. He made it 1 week past his 75th wedding anniversary with my mom, who's also, having difficulty. And in one more week, he would have made it to Father's Day, where it's the first Father's Day, obviously, I'll ever have. That a lot of firsts this year for missing my dad. So it'll sink in as those things happen. But John, any good qualities that I have, I got them from my dad or my mom or both. And the few bad qualities that I have also perhaps did not come from my dad or my mom, but I must have picked up a few bad habits along the way. But I had a great mom and dad. You can't choose your parents, and I really had great parents, and they had a great marriage, which was a great example, not just to me, but all the people that saw them in action. And my dad did a lot of mentoring, and not just his own kids, but it just really was a nice man, somebody, a role model, and my first hero.
Yeah, no doubt served his country as well. Want to recognize that as well. Entrepreneur, as you mentioned on your programs as well. So you probably got that gene, if you will, from him. When you were building, going back to your Beckett Media days, and you were building that up. How much, obviously, there's, like you said, you had a lot of teammates and people that were responsible along with yourself. But how, even with your dad, like how involved was he during those days, maybe with the company? Did you lean on him at times when you maybe had a tough decision or a decision that you were, or was it just sort of stuff you've already learned from growing up and being raised by him?
Kind of. I mean, basically, he had his own company, so and but we talked about business stuff over the years. I mean, it was just when it was time, and he would be a ready source of info. But just as a young man, you want to, as much as you can, do it yourself. My dad wanted me to be self reliant, but he was always ready. And of course, my youngest sister worked for me pretty early on and just did a great job. So I had some extra Beckett DNA in the company, pretty much almost from the start.
Did I know you got you said you got cards from your dad, and then you didn't realize it maybe at the time you got some of your uncle's cards as well. Being you became such a prominent figure in the hobby, did your dad collect even later on in life, or not necessarily?
No, I mean that's the reason I got the cards, because my dad and his younger brother, who was just a year younger, a little more than a year younger, they just collected when they were in their preteens and teens, and they were just in my grandmother's attic, and I was the main collector at that point. And at Christmas we visited. She just brought them down and said, "Here, we want you to have these," and she'd saved them. Now they were not even 20 years old at the time. I mean, they were, play balls were, this was in the late 50s. They were from the early 40s, the ones he had. So, uh, that was fortuitous. That was a great blessing. And so I took really good care of them, but it helped me to see that there are old cards that even their primitive printing and not as not as fancy as the cards that they were making then with tops. They're still really cool, and the Babe Ruth cards and things like that. It really was fundamental to my understanding that this was a hobby you could have for life. But my dad really just vicariously enjoyed it through me. My brother collected for a little while, but then, he had other stuff too. So this was uh, in fact, my parents are really good about helping each kid of the five, because I'm the oldest of five, my brother and my three sisters, to each kind of find their own path and come back if you needed help, but you find their own path. We still are a close family, but it isn't because, although, like I said, my sister worked with me and for me for many, many years and was wonderful. But they just wanted us to each reach our full potential. And my brother had a different path than I did. Actually, was in business with my dad for a long time as well, because he was the one that was in business with my dad. I was kind of independent.
Yeah, and again, it's great hearing you sharing that, and some people aren't as good at that maybe as you are. And like I said, I felt like I knew him while I've never met him, and he's like you said, he sounds like a great man, and you learned a lot, and you're probably still learning in some sort of way. So appreciate you sharing that episode with everybody, including myself. Let's get into some content. You some months back you went to Monday, Wednesday, Friday format rather than every day. Some people, are a little disappointed that we can't get Dr. Jim every day. Looking back now that you've done that, are how do you rate that decision? Is it easier? Is it how you kind of expected it to go, going from 5 days a week to three?
Well, the obvious answer is it's easier. And
Yeah,
my wife is happy. But more importantly, John, I think if I had not done that, and it was really last Thanksgiving, and I didn't have any premonition or prophetic thought that something might happen to my dad or my mom, but I'm really glad, because if I would have been doing 5 times a week, it would have been really difficult the last 2.5 months. My dad fell, broke his hip, and he was in the hospital for a long time, and then he had some rehab stuff, and really lost a lot of weight. It was pretty rough, and so I would have really I struggled as it was. But again, I got great contributors and people that pitched in, so it came together. But three was way better than five when I'm going over there a lot, and there were just stuff happens. Stuff happens.
yeah. And I mean, did you ever get the urge like, hey, I know I'm doing 3 days a week, but I kind of want to get this one out there. Do you ever have those temptations, or are you pretty disciplined?
You mean do an extra one or skip one?
Yeah, yeah,
I've done an extra one a couple of times. If
yeah,
something came up and I thought, well, I've already got Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but something happened on a Monday night, I'm going to drop something Tuesday morning and just stick it in there. But because it just even though I'm trying to be timeless, sometimes things really need to be dealt with sooner. And
yeah,
so, yeah,
yeah. No doubt.
I don't want to skip one, because I think I want to, fulfill my promise that I'm going to give less than 15 minutes whenever I do it. And that right now is Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Yeah. And I will say this: what you pack in 12 or 15 minutes, I'm envious because I can't do that. Sometimes
It's hard.
going 45 minutes.
I feel bad because I don't. Really try to edit it to where I'm not cutting any meat. But people ramble sometimes. You
I don't know who would do
I
such a thing.
I do too. But when it's an audio podcast, you can kind of think, well, I could take out that paragraph that was interesting, but it's relevant, but it's not required. And I think I want them to appreciate that, it's going to be less than 15 minutes. If all of a sudden I showed up with an hour long episode, I think people would freak out, uh, including me.
Yeah, I hear you. Speaking of content, like we've seen, no matter where the hobby is in recent times, what's not slowing down for sure is new content. We're seeing new podcasts get launched, whether it be audio only, video only, or both. Seems like every day, someone I may know personally is doing a podcast. I've been asked even for advice in some of those cases. Do you think there is? Can we get to an oversaturation point of too much content, or will the people who consume content be the judge of that and the consumers of that? What's your thoughts on is there a tipping point?
If there was a tipping point, we've tipped. But no, I'd say, John, it's like restaurants. Does the world need another restaurant? Yes, if it's a great restaurant or if it adds something different. But if it's across the corner from another restaurant, it needs to be distinctive. And so if people have a distinctive voice, uh, it's a free world and it's survival of the fittest. So I'm glad people are trying it. But the average podcast lasts 7 episodes. And so you and I are anomalies. We're the exceptions because you actually have something to say, and I actually have something to say. And some people only have 7 things to say. And when they say them, they exit stage left. And that's okay.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough, right? When we do this one, which is obviously an interview show, hobby quick hits, which I've had people on, but generally it's just me and a topic. And sometimes it can be difficult finding topics, or when you do so many, you're like, did I already talk about this already? Like, am I doing a repeat? And sometimes, that's a factor as well. But I think for me, and you, we've been in the hobby a long time, so I guess the advantage, if we have one, in your case, intelligence. In my case, just experiences. From almost 40 years of being in the hobby, and in my case, just wearing different hats. Collector, owning a store, doing shows, it just kind of doing almost kind of the circuit of the hobby. I think that's where my content really kind of is driven from. If I didn't have all those experiences and those years under my belt, like you said, it would be sometimes it's difficult now, be even the degree of difficulty would go up. Obviously, you've been in the hobby longer than I have. You've done a lot of more stuff on different levels. Is you ever have any trouble like coming up with a topic, or not necessarily?
No. My wife keeps asking me, "You gonna run out?" I said, "I'm not gonna run out of interesting guests. I'm not gonna run out of interesting cards. I'm not gonna run out of interesting sets." And the topics, the thematic stuff that those things pop up, and they're going to deal with that. But like I said, I'm mainly trying to be timeless, and even with the timeless topics, it's just not. It's it, I'm closing in on 1,000, and there's another 1,000 I could. And I'm not promising to do that, but there's and I got Rich Klein. He would never run out, and some of my other guests. I will say this: what I've realized now is where I duplicate, and I can't help it, is when I do, which I've done a lot of listener question episodes now. Some of those they're asking for answers to questions that I know I did an episode on, but it's kind of my pet peeve. I have a really good friend that's a really good podcaster, and he's got a couple hundred episodes. And when there's a question that comes up or he's talking with somebody, he said, I dealt with that in episode 113. And then, the next, 5 minutes later, I dealt with that in episode 39. And he gives the title of it and all that stuff. And I thought, I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah.
So I get a question in the listener questions, I just answer it, and I try to answer it in a different way and not be robotic in my answer and treat the nuance of their question. And so otherwise it'd be boring for me too.
Now, the gentleman you speak of, is he looking that up and then, or does he know off the top of his head like his episodes? I could never do
No,
that.
he's actually scripting them. He and I compared notes. We started about the same time. He's very professional. It's not in the industry, but it's just I have a lot of friends that do podcasting, and so he we've talked about it. I've learned from him. He's learned from me. But he scripts them. And when I started, I thought, I'm going to script it and I'm going to read the script. And he's actually a professor also, and so he's used to kind of like giving a speech, and I just thought that's not what I want to do. But he's he has higher production values. I don't want that. I want it to be. That's why I appreciate you. It's just a couple guys talking.
Yeah, and it's honestly just not to pat myself on it. It's the biggest compliment I think that this show gets is I get feedback from people that say, "John, I love." Like I feel like I'm eavesdropping on a conversation, whether it be at a bar or a restaurant. I feel like I'm the third person. I might not be able to speak, and you might not be able to hear me, but I feel like it's on that sort of level. And even when I do these, and I've said this before, so I apologize for those that have heard it. I don't write a lot of questions down. My questions literally, I might write a few just so I don't miss anything and don't forget. But most of my questions in the conversation come from the conversation itself, from the answer another question is born from. And I think a lot of the feedback I get is they feel like it's not scripted. I've had people say, "I know you don't script your questions. I can tell by the way you ask them, and I appreciate that about that." So, I've always sort of done it that way, and it just seems to people seem to appreciate it, and I think it's even for the guest and for me. I think it's being a little off the cuff is more enjoyable in both of those cases. I may tell someone, "Hey, these are kind of some of the things areas I want to go into," but I don't really say the questions or anything like that. I just kind of tell them sort of topic based, and I just think for this show, it seems to work the best.
One of the reasons I think you've had a lot of fun with this is because you have different formats and different shows. But my buddy, he's a professor, and so he is scripting even the punctuation, John. So I mean, he's got a good voice and he delivers it, and it's great. But it doesn't sound like he's reading. But he probably even has a teleprompter. So he's very good. He's very good, but he doesn't have guests either. So he has no filler words or no start and stop of having a thought and then changing it in the middle, which I do and you do and almost
Yeah.
everybody else does. But he's following his script. See, and I admire that he spent a lot of time on it. So he'll do a draft and then he'll clean up the draft. Then he kind of reads it. That wouldn't be
Yeah.
fun for me. That wouldn't be fun.
Well, you can't say he's not prepared, right? He's
Very
attention to detail, which is a great trait. It's a great trait, and to each their own, right? Just like we say, hobby your way, right? Podcast your way as well. When we were on Hobby Hotline, we talked a little bit about the ongoing situation at Beckett. I don't want to I don't want to overkill it but we haven't really talked about it in this show. I'll just kind of ask you, in your opinion, I know you like Kevin Isaacson, you know him very, very well. You have a lot of faith in him. But that being said, do you think this is sort of, I mean, if this for some reason, playing armchair from a distance, if this doesn't work out, I mean, is this kind of the last chance or not necessarily?
Well, my hope is that the Beckett brand is an enduring brand. There's ups and downs in every brand, but I want it to be trending up. And I will say this: I've spent more time with the leadership, the new leadership, in the last couple of months than I've spent with the company leadership in a year for the last 15 years. So, and it's been fun. I mean, they're bringing some things up to me. I'm bringing some things up to them, and I don't think decisions have been finalized, but I think they're really trying to come out of this with a strong presentation, with a vision that people can say, yeah, that's I can get on board with that. That's internally and externally.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you from a selfish point of view. I'm glad they're listening to you, and I'm glad there's more of that dialogue. Whether you'll say it or not, I'll say it for you. Dr. Jim, you know that brand exists. That has your name on it because of you. If it'd be different if you left the hobby and sort of rode off into the wild wild west now, but you've stayed in the hobby, you stayed active, you got your fingers still very much on the pulse. So it's not like they're not listening, or they're listening to someone who left for 20 years but did it. Uh you're still active, you still know what people want, consumers, because you're one yourself. You go to shows, you talk to people, you have them on your show, you see them in person. So it's nice to hear that the current, I'll say, regime, and maybe not the right word, but is at least attentive to some of your feedback, where, like you said before, maybe not as much.
As I always get a kick out of doing these interviews with you, because when you say things, it makes me think in a certain way that's different. And one of the things that's different, I'm realizing now that these these other content creators out there did take 20 years off or 15 years off. I mean, they quit in 2003 and they came back with COVID. And all of a sudden they've got a megaphone, a microphone, and they're instant experts. Well, why can't I be an instant expert too? I didn't even leave. Uh,
Yeah.
so even if I had left, I still would be. I would hope they would hear not just about but see, now I'm trying to have some continuity with the good old days, the distant old days, the more recent past, and then what's going on now and what's maybe going on in the future. So I want to be helpful in that way. But they get to make the call. I'm just an advisor or a consultant.
But I know you kind of downplayed your role there, or your expertise, right? But someone that has done a lot, seen a lot, still doing a lot, and seen a lot. So to have that resource and not take advantage would be, to me, if I may be so, a shortcoming on that part. If they weren't to, heck, I've asked you stuff with tried to pick your brain. So the fact that if they wouldn't, I'm glad you're saying they're doing maybe a little bit more of that. But to not do it, I think would be more on them than an indictment on you.
I get it. I mean, there's two different philosophies. If they're trying to create uh, a path forward, some people don't think that path forward has anything to do with the past. And so I don't agree with that, but there's some people that come in, they say, they've earned the right to do it the way they think. And if I am publicly against it, that's going to make somebody look bad. So I don't want to embarrass anybody, but I'm trying to quietly influence. And if they ask my opinion, I'm going to give it.
Yeah, no, and I definitely appreciate that about you. We've seen sort of the hobby kind of reset, kind of slow down a little bit, kind of cool off a little bit. I always say, people ask me all the time, is that bad, John? Should I be worried? And it's such a loaded question. I can't, there's not one answer. Everyone has a different opinion on things. For me, who likes to buy cards, right? Stuff's gotten somewhat more affordable. I think that's a good thing. I'm also a dealer. I set up at shows. I'm not even complaining about it. You want to sell, you gotta be competitive. You might have to lower your prices, put new price tags on stuff that you could look at that one of two ways. Some people get a little more grumpy about it, or I should say, some dealers get a little more grumpy about it than others. But I just it is what it is, and I just kind of adapt and hopefully thrive and survive. But other people like to make predictions, and the sky's falling, or this is not good. You've seen ups and downs through the years. What do you say to that question in the current market and condition?
Well, I don't think the sky's falling, but I will say this. I was using the restaurant analogy. The world doesn't need another restaurant unless it's really an interesting restaurant. Well, that's what's happening with cards. Cards are like restaurants. There's different segments of the industry. Some of them are like really expensive, fancy restaurants, and some are like mid-priced, really good restaurants, and some of them are fast food. And when you have economic conditions change, any of those, I'm just using three segments of fast food and, kind of regular priced and then ultra expensive stuff. The ultra expensive, to me, that's, that's kind of gambling. You're paying an awful lot of money, hoping that it's going to keep going up, and you're already dealing with prices in some cases that are equal to a car or a house or things like that. And so the mid-price stuff, it's chucking along. I don't know that it's way up or way down. If it is down, it's down because it went up. In some of that stuff, and in the lower price stuff, I don't even know that that's affected. It's no longer. It's just not discussed. But when I see my selling on eBay and ComC, it's not affected that much. But it's not as expensive cards. But if I were buying $100,000 cards, I'd lose some sleep, and I don't want to lose sleep. I don't begrudge those who do it, but they just need to know that it could go down $100,000. It could go $90,000 down. Now it could double also on the upside, but I don't. That's not the kind of investments I like to make. So I have cards that are expensive, and I'm holding on to them. It sort of doesn't matter what my basis is. I have it, and if I sold it right now, I'd get X, which is a lot more than what I paid for, obviously. So, see, I don't see it as one thing, John. I see it as like restaurants, and it could be economic conditions where the bad restaurants have trouble, or the good restaurants, or the fast food ones. It's just the competition in the category, and the problem with some of these goat and glamour cards, they're creating new ones. The logo man stuff. There's another group of them this year, and so last year's and there's always the chase for the current thing. So the universe is expanding of these very, very expensive restaurants. And there need to be enough dollars to service them all, or there are going to be too many nice restaurants. That doesn't mean all restaurants are doing bad. It might mean that very expensive Italian restaurants, there's too many of those.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's well said. And we're not going to go down that rabbit hole, but that brings up the whole topic of artificial scarcity and that sort of thing. It's one of the reasons I've always been into vintage, but really the last few years, I've really went that direction even more so than ever before. This is one question I actually wrote down. Like I said, I don't write a lot down. But do you think people are more, when it comes to the hobby, do you think people are more concerned what the cards are worth today, or when you were doing price guides? Or is it the same?
In the absence of any information, I'm thinking it's the same. And it's the same also philosophy, sort of, that a lot of people don't admit it. you know, these people who are getting a magazine, and I know we had great articles and art and all that stuff, but these people who are getting a subscription to the magazine and poring over it to see what went up and went down, but then they want to say, "Well, I'm not in it for the money," or "I don't care about the pricing." No, everybody should care, but if you take it too far, and think I'm going to put all my investments in this, I think that's not prudent. So I think it's very similar to what it was. It seems like more because the expensive cards now are way more expensive than they would have been. Way more. It just so much more. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's true. And I chuckled, I smiled because everyone I say, oh, I don't collect because of the value or the monetary value. But then when they pull something good, the first question they ask, hey, what's this worth? So I always say anyone that says they don't care what something's worth, they're not being 100%. They may not be collecting to resell ever, and I get all that. But anyone, everyone wants to know, hey, what's this worth? So whenever I hear someone says, I honestly don't care, I always say, man, you're you're either the unicorn or you're not being truthful, because I think it's one of the first things you think if you pull something that you think is of significance.
Well, there's a dealer that sets up at pretty much all the Dallas shows, and he has more multiple tables, and all he has is game used and autographed cards, certified autographs, certified game used, and everything is $5 for one. I think if you get 100, it's down to 250. So $2.50, and it's thousands of game used patches and things and autographs. Now they're not the superstar players, but the amazing thing, so he does great business. But if he buys a collection and he pulls out the Tom Brady's or the stuff, Michael Jordan doesn't really have, it wouldn't be in that league, but just, and even Tom Brady would. But if he bought a collection and had a real star player, he's going to pay that. He's going to charge so much more for that. He's going to get it slabbed or put it under glass in his showcase. But he has these monster boxes, tons of monster boxes of this stuff. And so if the regular guy is $2.50, but the other guy in the same set is thousands of dollars, that's you would think that's something's got to give because they're equally scarce in the way they were produced.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. I gotta ask you too. I'm looking at some great cards behind you. I'm a little jealous, but do you still have, like, people talk about hobby goals? Like, my goal this year is to do that. I know you've talked about sort of downsizing a little bit, but even past that, do you have like cards? Like, I always approach, and we're going to talk a little bit about the national here, kind of finish on a high note. I always kind of go into the national, Dr. Jim, with the goal of acquiring one or two cards for my PC, which is Hall of Fame graded rookie cards. Do you have cards that are still on your target list? Or do you have goals on that sort of level? Uh, you know what I mean? Or have you really checked a lot of those boxes?
Uh, no, well, let me say both ways. Number one, I'm not interested in buying those kind of cards. And number two, I'm not interested in selling those kind of cards. So I've completely excised that from my national experience. Because if I was doing that too, I wouldn't have I would take away from time of connecting with people I haven't seen for a long time, as well as working the dollar boxes. And the dollar boxes are self-preservation, that I get to sit in a chair for some hours to just and chew the fat with somebody and look through cards. And I'm not wearing out any shoe leather. And like I said, I've had people just sit down and and look at cards and visit. And then, but if I were going around looking at all the showcases, which I used to do, but more in the price guide thing, that would be a different kind of exhaustion, John. So I just draw the line and say that's not. I don't want to buy them, and I'm not going to sell them. And if I look really closely, I'm thinking, I got that card, maybe. And so the question is, would I rather have the money or the card? And right now, the cards I have, I'd rather have the money, except for my 1% a month, which I'm actually following through on that. I'm actually following through on that. So, and the national is not like this, if my wife might listen to this, so I'm going to say this in a careful way. Sometimes there's subtraction by addition. In other words, if I buy stuff at the National and it winds up stuff that when I take it home, I don't really need that. That is stuff that sweetens up my eBay lots. And so then I have happy customers that do repeat business because the additional cards that I put in the lots are good.
I got a question based on someone buys something off eBay or ComC from you. Do when they get the package, when they get their cards, well, ComC ships it for you, so that kind of is. But eBay, where you have to ship the card, will the person who receives that package know that they just bought a card off Dr. James Beckett? Is it will
I
they
hope
will it
not.
be?
I hope not. I want them to just buy the cards because it seems like a good deal, and then I wanted to be happy when they open the package and say, "Hey, this was as described, and this is a+ seller or a 5-star seller or whatever." I'm not. I get too many questions as it is. I have trouble keeping track, and so I don't need eBay and ComC to be, asking me questions about specific cards or why something was priced a certain way. It's just it is what it is, and people have been pretty good about that. There's some people that do know, but I'm trying to keep it simple.
So you can correct me if I'm wrong. When you're walking the floor at the National and like stopping in front of a dealer's table, it's more to talk to that person because you know them
Yeah.
than hey, I'm looking for this card type of deal.
It is absolutely not about looking for any card. If I saw something that was real, I just haven't bought anything in a long time. Now, again, Rich remembers the days when, which would be more than 15 years ago, where that's all I did, and it wasn't looking for me as much as type cards, interesting cards that would broaden our various catalogs and almanacs, and it was in all the sports, and that was a lot of fun. But now I don't have that, so I'm not I need to be more of a seller than a buyer, and I'm not ready to sell those kind of cards. So I'm not even thinking about that. When I get after 50 months, John, of 1% a month, and I'm down to the last half, then maybe I'll start thinking about that. And then I'm a little bit of an analytical researcher guy. So before I would sell, uh, even a duplicate Roberto Clemente card, I would think, okay, does this need to be graded? What are the comps, or what would I want to put on this? And it might be like we said, I don't just go straight by the comps, but I would look at the comps and then I would make my decision. And I'm not ready to start doing that because that takes a long time to me to be doing card by card. And so a lot of my comp C work is bulk, if that's understandable, and my eBay stuff is definitely bulk. I need to get rid of some of the bulk, but some of that bulk is not worth even one of Roberto Clemente duplicate cards from the 60s, even not much less the 50s. I'm fine with that.
I got you. I got you. That's discipline. I don't think even if I wanted to do it, I don't think I could probably.
There's a number of people in the hobby that I've known, and I'm still good friends with them, and their goal is to have all the cards. And I had a fork in the road in 1979, 78 probably, to where am I going to try to get all the cards in the world, or am I going to do price guides? And when I did price guides, that really fit my skill set, and I had some great contributors, and it really came together. I had a great run, but that took me out of the buying and selling market because I was a very active buyer and seller in the 70s. That's where I built my collection. I basically got all the sets in the 70s. Not from the 70s, but in the 70s, I got all the Gaudis and the play balls and all that stuff. So, and 52 tops and all that. So I had everything. And so for whatever reason, I thought, well, I think the opportunity for doing a price guide is really exciting to me, and it's going to take my full attention. And the conflict of interest of me buying the same stuff I'm trying to be objective of what they're really selling for. That's uh, that's a problem I'm going to avoid. And so
Yeah,
jump
and
into
and
it
and
hard. Yeah.
and kudos on you, right? Maybe someone in the same position wouldn't have taken that sort of integrity, stance of integrity. They would just say, "I'll just do it quieter, but I'm still gonna do it." So, you know, and discipline, right? It takes a lot of discipline, which I know I probably uh, couldn't pull off. Well, we're talking about the national. You've been to everyone. We're going to see you here in 30 something days at this national. What are some of your favorite? Obviously, I'm wearing my and here's the crazy part. I grabbed the shirt out of my closet. I didn't do this on purpose, but I'm wearing the singles club shirt today, but more by happenstance than anything else. So, as you said on your show, and you said it even today, that's one of your favorite things. But what other types of things, do you enjoy? I know meeting old friends, new friends, and just kind of speak to what the national means to you.
Well, there's probably 3 things I do. Oh, well, 4 if you count the dinners. I mean, I try to
Yeah,
have kind of thematic dinners. The first couple of nights, I do kind of dinners with old friends that represent one, the kind of the old timers in the industry, and the hobby hotline dinner will be a lot of fun. And so I got that going. And in the daytime, when I'm not looking at cards, I'm going to be wandering around, and I'm doing 2 things. One, I'm connecting with people. I might meet some new friends too, but there's some people that I really like that I only see once a year. Want to do that. And occasionally I'll bump into somebody and say, you know what, I really need to have you on my podcast. And so I'm realizing now that's not the time to do the podcast. I'm going to whip out my microphone, even though I have it with me. I'm thinking, let's just schedule it for Zoom next month or whenever. It's not important, and so I'll do that. So I'm either connecting with them and catching up, or kind of saying, hey, let's do a podcast next month. And then the other is just kind of sitting around and still kibitzing and talking to people, or just working the boxes. And those are some of my people too, John. I've had a lot of fun sitting there, and if it's by myself, that's okay. But a lot of times, somebody will come up and they're curious about what I'm pulling out, and I've got things that I pull, and it's very non-overlapping with what Rich Klein pulls. So that's why he's one of my buddies to be a wingman, or I don't know if I'm his wingman or vice versa, but we pull different stuff.
Yeah, and I've been one of those that grabbed the seat next to you, and we had a nice chat. I had to get up. You outlasted me. You won that battle. Do you get people maybe sit next to you and like try to pick your brain about, hey, who are you buying, or who should I be buying?
Well, they might pick my brain, but it shouldn't be about that, because again,
Yeah,
it's like you would tell them. I can't tell you how to collect, but they can't do it the way I do it. If they say, I want to do it the way you do it, I say, well, okay, first do a bunch of price guides for a few decades, so that you know the long tail and you understand the principles of supply and demand and scarcity in the industry, that you have to be able to, like Rich says, like we both, when you see something that looks like you haven't seen it for a while, or you haven't seen it, it's either, it could be a color variation, hey, that doesn't look right, or it's an SSP or something. You think, that's not the pose I'm used to. Rich is terrific at that, and I'm good too. But you can't do that. You can't just all of a sudden say, I'm going to do that, because you can't look up dollar box cards one at a time. You have to just either say, I'm going to take it or I'm not going to take it. And if you take it, you might have made a mistake. It might be worth less than $1. Now, most of them are worth, and that, a plug for the singles club. They're not trying to put cards in there for a quarter that they're selling for $1. They're trying to put cards in there that are at least $1, because that's their reputation, that they're good deals in there. And they put in a few cards, they put in there really good deals. Now, they're not the only ones that do it, but the word would get out if you're looking through a whole big box like a double shoe, and you pull out one card, and it took you 15 minutes to spend $1. That's just, and but the card's worth 250. So it's not very exciting. And so you need to pull more, and you just need to enjoy the flow of seeing what's there. And so if I go up to, I will. Here's a tip. Okay, when I go up to a new person that I don't know, I might do one row of their box. And if I pull nothing out of it, I probably just keep moving. Just get up and go. If I
So
pull,
you're dipping your
I'll
toe in
do
the
a little
water.
sample. I'll do a little sample. Okay, but if
Yeah,
there's some good stuff in there, then I'll keep going.
yeah. Well, it makes sense, right? You want to, time doesn't grow on trees. You want to put it where and you're from where I think a lot of people at this point are familiar with the
Plus,
singles
I
club.
kind of forgot to say this is that in many cases, my banter, such that I have, is with the dealer. It's not necessarily. It could be with you if you're next sitting there. We'll be talking about stuff, but it could be. I mean, a lot. I mainly buy from people that I like, and after all these years, I know a bunch of them. And so, if I thought the singles club guys were jerks, which they're not. They're the opposite of jerks. They're good
Yeah,
guys and they aim to please. Then I wouldn't want to. I mean, I've got lots of places to give my business, including no business. I don't need more cards, but I love shopping with. I want to go in shops or booths or tables that where I like the people and the cards are interesting and the people are interesting. So I've had great conversations with because I'm there for a few hours sometimes.
yeah, yeah. No doubt. I know. I know the day I sat next to you, I was there probably an hour, and I was like, I got to get up.
Well, you know, here's the thing, like we're saying, you got to get up. But if say you're there for an hour or two, are you more tired for sitting for an hour or two than you are for walking the floor if there's no carpet for an hour or two? It's pretty simple
Yeah,
to
that's
me.
true.
So I'm trying to go kind of rotate a little bit, stand up every once in a while, go walk around, then come back. But some of these booths, it's hard to stop because you
Yeah,
lose your place.
yeah,
Not that somebody's going to scoop you as much as you just think, I need to finish this. I'm gonna do all their football today, and if it's really good, maybe I'll come back tomorrow and do some baseball.
yeah. Well, no doubt. Well, listen, we're coming to the national. I'm look forward to, as always, seeing you in person. You mentioned the Hobby Hotline dinner
Looking
as
forward
well.
to
Always have fun when we do that, and hopefully main stage as well. We'll see how that plays out. But Dr. Jim, as always, thank you for making some time, especially under the circumstances as well too.
Well, I've said you're a prolific podcaster, so I enjoy the enthusiasm you bring to it, and you're a mensch. You're a mensch.
Yeah, I try. Some days I'm a better mensch than other days. I will say that though. But Dr. Jim, give out where people. I think most people know, but for the two people that don't know about sports and card insights, steer those two people in the right direction
That's
there.
kind of my place. Again, if people write me at drjamesbeckett@gmail.com, I generally, I don't always respond. I read everything, but some of the times I'll just respond on the air, instead of giving an answer to one person. I'll just think, yeah, that's a good question for everybody. I'll accumulate that with my next listener question episodes. Yeah. So it's been great, John. I've really enjoyed it, and you've made it fun as well.
Well, I appreciate that. Sports Card Insights, any major podcast platform, big ones, small platforms, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, the best 15 minutes you'll probably hear in a podcast form. And I know I enjoy it as well as thousands of other people. So
It's,
keep on keeping on.
it's not necessarily the best 15 minutes. The best 15 minutes is probably somewhere in Jeremy Lee's 2 hours. But where is it? Or, or
Yeah,
or,
well, listen, listen. There's two great podcasters right there.
or the
So
crossover. The crossover,
yeah,
those guys. It's just, yeah.
so
Josh and Chris. I mean, Christina.
yeah,
There's at least 15 great minutes in there, and
yeah.
usually a lot more. But I just don't have the patience to listen to. all 2 hours every
Yeah.
week.
Well, in my, we've lowered like this Sports Card Nation is generally under an hour now, and Hobby Quick Hits is about 20, 25 minutes. So I've kind of like I don't want to say I've figured out the secret formula, but I've tinkered with it, and I think it's a little more, time wise, it's definitely more consumable. So,
I am a loyal subscriber to you, John.
well,
Thanks. Keep up the good work.
thank you, Dr. Jim. Take care.
Okay. See you next time.
All right.
Bye-bye.